It is truly hard to quantify, Jones, how many incredible ideas are born out of Shane Sugar Shack at Carolina basketball camp.
Yep.
Shane Parrish has been a guest on this podcast before.
Yes.
If you're a longtime listener, that's a throwback. You know the whole debate with Shane.
Yep.
There was some controversy.
About classes,
Yeah. But one thing we know for sure is that Shane operates the finest Sugar Shack in all the land. And every summer for about 2 weeks,
we live there, I feel like.
Essentially, we just hang out at Shane's Sugar Shack. And folks come and folks go. But some folks come and you walk away going, that'd be great on the pod.
Yep.
Jonathan Miller is such a person.
Yeah.
And that is why he is with us here today in Pod World headquarters, and we will recreate this past summer's 2 weeks of Shane Sugar Shack conversations.
John, before you say anything, I have to say I am very weary of the fact that we have cameras in here. He looks too good. Like, we shouldn't have had cameras in here for this head of hair and this, like, sports coat that he's got on. Yeah. You can't be coming here showing us up like that.
Listen, if you're going to be on this podcast, you have to dress the part. No,
what? Listen, look at us.
You guys definitely dressed the part. I overdressed the part. No, you guys started that podcast in a perfect way, and you didn't even know it. I was actually doing my day job a moment ago, and I was getting lunch with somebody whose kids went to camp pre-COVID. And she was telling a story, and she said, the guy in the basement with the candy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Referring to Shane's Sugar Shack. And I said, I'm not sure I've ever heard it described more perfectly than that, actually.
That actually sounds like something you'd see on like an Amber Alert.
When you send your kids to camp, you don't want to pick them up on the last day. What was the best part, Johnny? There was this guy in the basement with candy where I spent all my time.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. And they spend a lot of time down there.
Does Duke have a basketball camp? Maybe we'll look at that next year.
I'm not sure Coach Williams or Coach Davis were planning for it to be received that way. That said, she said they had an amazing time at camp, and all the kids went back, and Shane Sugar Shack was the highlight of the week, as it is every year for every kid, I think.
Of course it is. What's up? How you doing? What's going on?
Oh, man. What's going on? Everything's going great. Everything's going great. I live in Burlington now, work at Elon University. I was texting with Adam. Funny enough, when he texted me about this podcast, was a day that things went haywire in our world. We just had another baby, our second daughter, our third child, and so that's what's been going on for the last couple of months. About all that's been going on for the last couple of months.
Absolutely.
I was a little skeptical that Jonathan seemed to believe that was more important than being on the podcast.
Yeah.
But we've worked it out now, and now he's prioritized podcast above parenting, as it should be, and he's here with us.
Well, it's a lot like golf. I mean, I walked into the hospital room and said, listen, Shelly, I need to get out of here for a few hours and shoot down to Chapel Hill. And she looked at me about the same way when I say, hey, listen, I'm going to play golf this weekend. No, it's been a fun ride over the past couple of months, but we're doing good.
For those who know Jonathan either from his day job or don't know his Tar Heel connection. So you were a Tar Heel basketball player, 2 years on JV, 2 years on varsity. Is that right?
Exactly right.
2000 to 2004?
Yeah, exactly right. 2000 to 2002 on JV with Doug Wojcik, and then 2002 to 2004 on varsity for Coach Daugherty and Coach Williams. Yep.
This is how old you are. Doug Wojcik's son's on the team now.
Listen, don't I know it?
I'm glad I'm not that old.
Really.
Carolina's sort of at the center of everything, right? And so when Paxton transferred back here, I sent a note to Coach Wojcik because we hadn't talked in a while. And 2 days later, I get a call with a East Lansing, Michigan area code. And me being super smart, had no idea who it was. I answered, hey, this is Jonathan. And it was Coach Wojcik, close the loop. And we talked about him transferring back here and really talked about the time he had here on their visit that convinced him to actually come back here to Chapel Hill. It was really, really cool.
Oh, tell us a little bit about it. The visit, what you heard about the Wojciks.
Well, of course, what I heard about the visit was Hoots, right? Doug, because Hoots was the head manager for JV with Coach Wojcik when I was on it. And then the head manager on varsity with Coach Williams in my final year as well. And so he said, we spent 48 hours in Chapel Hill. It was perfect. We had a great time getting to hang out with Hoots for those 2 days. And we just realized that was the best place for him to be, which I think most people who come down here end up in.
Yeah.
You longtime North Carolina ties. You grew up in Burlington.
I did. Yeah.
A North Carolina fan as you were growing up?
The biggest. Yeah, no. I mean, it's funny you say that. I mean, I've sort of lived the local small town North Carolina kid dream, right? Came to Carolina just for academics, just applied here to go to school. And then the first night in Granville Towers, a kid that I played high school basketball against at East Chapel Hill, Eric Henderson, said, "Hey, we need to go try out for the JV basketball team." I said, "I didn't know they had a JV basketball team. Let's do it." And so a few weeks later, we went to tryouts. And as luck would have it, Michael Brooker was a volunteer basketball coach for the JV program that year. And I found out a few years later that if not for him, Coach Wojcik would have not kept me on the team, I don't think. And he was the guy who spoke up and said, no, I like him. Let's keep him on the team. And the rest is history.
What do you like about you other than, for people who don't know, Jonathan Miller can shoot?
Yeah, he can.
It's about the only thing I can do. Actually, you know what he said he liked about me? This shows you how smart I was as an 18-year-old, as a freshman here at North Carolina. I wore Kansas Jayhawk shorts to like replica game shorts to JV North Carolina basketball tryouts, right? They were probably just the coolest ones I had at the time. And Brooker said that he liked the Jayhawk shorts and that I drew 4 charges during
look at that.
tryouts.
Scrappy.
I was lucky I was at the North Carolina JV basketball tryouts, or else that might not have played as well. Because outside of shooting and drawing charges, there wasn't a lot else to my game.
Can you imagine the other guys like, look at this guy?
Yeah.
3 charges he's taking.
Yeah,
in this
listen,
thing.
you work with what you've got, Jones.
Don't I know it? Trust me. Okay, so obviously that was a tumultuous is a strong word, but that I'll use it. That was a tumultuous time for Carolina basketball. From the just being a part of it. Mm-hmm. Can you take us through what that transition was like from Coach Doherty to Coach Williams?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, well, it was a tumultuous time, right? I mean, I don't think that's any secret to anyone. I'll say, Coach Doherty in my junior year. Actually, I'll start with Coach Wojcik. Right after my sophomore JV season ended,
and that was the 8-20 varsity year, right?
It was. Yeah. And all throughout that year, me and some other JV guys would stay after JV practice and run the sets of the opposing team throughout that year. So you could kind of call us a scout team. We stopped doing that after that year. And I kept doing the scout team as I was on the varsity team, which was actually a lot of fun. But so I had some exposure to the varsity program. Philip McLam and Damian Price had been on the JV program with me, the JV squad, the year before, but had moved up. And so at the end of that sophomore year, I sat down with Coach Wojcik for a post-season meeting, and again, shows you how smart I am. He said, "Listen, if you stick around and work camp and work out with the team, you'll have a chance." And I looked at him and said, "A chance to do what?" Maybe it existed at the time, but it didn't in my mind, sort of that pathway that JV could provide to varsity. I thought I was, experiencing JV basketball and everything it had to offer, and then I would go about my business. So he opened my eyes to the possibility, and I quickly found an apartment in Chapel Hill so I could stick around and work out every day during the summer. And work camp over the summer, and didn't find out until actually my birthday of that year, October 18th of, I guess, what would have been 2002, after practicing with the team for a few months, that I had made the team. And so, thinking back on that, I give a lot of thanks to Coach Wojcik, Coach Doherty, for giving me the opportunity, as you referenced, a North Carolina kid, to live out a dream by playing on the team. But yeah, it's funny, going through that year, the things you remember are the good things, right? Like, I remember actually playing against Coach Williams in Madison Square Garden when, Kansas was ranked very highly. I don't know how high, but we weren't ranked, and beating them pretty handily, and then turning around 2 days later and beating Stanford to win the preseason NIT, immediately shooting to number 12 in the country overnight, right?
Yeah.
You'll remember, it was Raymond, Sean, Rashad's, first. And Byron, Damian, and David, I should say too. They're all their first couple months on campus, and they supercharged the environment very quickly with their talent. You referenced that off season was tumultuous, right? The transition was, honestly, people would probably say, "Oh gosh, okay," because of the success that was had very quickly after, was amazing. I think it was probably pretty hard for a lot of guys, right? I remember the first conversation that Coach Williams had with us in the locker room after the press conference. he made a point to say, this is going to be really hard, right? We are not just going to start winning games because our staff is now here. We're going to challenge you guys to do more. And I think largely, the response of the guys that year when I was still on the team, and specifically the year after I left when they won a championship in 2005, their response to that challenge is what really carried them through.
I think when people think about that group, there's a lot of Tar Heels that really warm people's heart, like Raymond Felton, like, Sean May, Jawad Williams, yeah, Jackie Manuel, I'm in his posse. What's it like to be a teammate of Rashad McCants?
Oh, it was great, honestly. I mean, well, here, I'll answer that by explaining what it's like to guard Rashad McCants every day in practice. That's not so great. I was, 6'1", about $185, and I can't tell you how Rashad was probably 6'4", and 225 and very solid. And he would take me down in the post and just abuse me all day long, right? But he was just so talented, right? I mean, I mentioned that Kansas game up in New York in the preseason NIT, and we really built a game plan around him. I mean, Coach Daugherty implemented a new offense for that game in the week leading up to it, and it clearly worked. I think we won by more than 20 points. That was side note, the first game I ever played in at Carolina was in Madison Square Garden.
No big deal. Guys, don't make a big deal about that, please. He just wanted to let you know.
Listen, make a big deal about it if you'd like to. I don't have a problem with it at all. No. But no, I mean, Rashad was an amazing player. And at the time, you're all 18 to 22 years old. You're just friends and teammates. And but I'll say, I mean, in awe of like the natural abilities he was given and what he could do on a basketball court, no question.
Did you ever throw up the diamond and think it made you look cool, and then realize, oh, wait a minute, I don't look as cool as Rashad?
Well, I've mentioned a couple of moments where I wasn't very smart already on this podcast. I was smart enough to know that me throwing up the diamond or any other celebratory, sign would have been very bad. And plus, you have to do something good to throw up a celebratory sign, and those moments were few and far between in my basketball career. So,
okay, I'm not trying to put you in a bad spot, and we've had Matt Daugherty on the podcast before years ago, and it was a good, long, very open conversation. Yeah, from somebody who was there. Mm-hmm. Why do you think it didn't work?
Oh man, that's a hard question to answer, and I'll start by saying it's harder for a walk-on at the time, I think, to answer, only because your pathway there is a little different, and your role on the team is a little different too, right? And so I watching all of it unfold, I think there was the thing I've said over the years to people who have asked that exact question, right, is that like in situations that go bad, there's always enough blame to go around, right? It's never one person's fault, right? And I think you had a lot of young guys on the team, for one. Coach Daugherty was a young coach, had experienced a lot of success early on, right? And then for whatever reason, the variables just didn't work in that moment, right? And at the end of the day, I mean, him being a huge part of the Carolina basketball family still to this day, nobody ever wants that to go bad, right? And so I don't know that I could pinpoint one thing, but I'll say that in those moments, there's certainly enough blame to go around for everybody to that it's hard to pinpoint one thing or one person for having that go bad. It's just a big stage, man. It's a lot of eyes. It's a lot of expectations, and managing that can't be easy. But I'll tell a quick story. Like right after, it was probably a couple weeks after the press conference when Coach Daugherty stopped coaching, right? And the Chick-fil-A in University Mall was our go-to all the time, and so we were in there probably too much.
Sammy, what up?
No doubt.
Sammy Culberson. Yeah, Sammy's the guy. Absolutely. And I was in there grabbing Chick-fil-A one day for lunch, and he was actually at the Verizon kiosk. I think actually getting a new phone. Funny enough, right? And I ran into him, and we stopped and talked for like 5 or 10 minutes. And he had traveled, I think, in Europe for a little while, and then he almost went out of his way to like engage me and be really kind and just share a 5-10 minute conversation about some memories of me on the team the year prior, and couldn't have been more complimentary of Carolina and me in the program, right? And so I think that says a lot about him.
When you're a North Carolina guy who grew up a big Carolina fan and never even dreamed, it sounds like, of getting the chance to play in the Smith Center, even on the JV team, much less on the varsity Tar Heels. How many I can't believe this is happening to me moments do you have, and what stands out to you?
Man, a lot of them. What stands out to me? Well, I mentioned, getting into a game at Madison Square Garden when you're a guy who never played 1 minute of AAU basketball in his life, and was probably better at another sport than he was at basketball. I was the third leading scorer on my high school basketball team, and we didn't win a state champion. And that wasn't that was a local Burlington Walter M. Williams shout out basketball team, right? And so then getting into a game at Madison Square Garden against Kansas in the preseason NIT, that stands out as an oh gosh moment, right? There's almost too many to name. I'll tell you, the funny thing is, I wish I was more mature when I was 18 to 22 to realize those moments, but they really sink in as you look back on them as you get older. And we mentioned Shane Sugarshack. The reason I was there is because my 12-year-old now goes to basketball camp, and I go back and coach at basketball camp while he's there. When you look at it through, your kid's eyes, how big it looks to them, and then you think, oh man, I was part of that. I think that's when it really sinks in, right? So yeah, it's hard to answer. I think that is one of those moments, but too many of them to probably name.
What sport were you better at?
Soccer.
Really?
Yeah.
Always? Just that was always the case?
Yeah, I think so. Soccer was, growing up, sort of my favorite sport, and I think probably my best sport just from a pure talent perspective. Not that I had much in any of the sports I played. But I do have to say my son now gives me a hard time because he thinks I don't want him to play basketball. And I have to look at him and say, son, I played basketball in college. I do want you to play basketball. But he plays soccer as well and is really good at both and loves both. And it's been fun to be a dad, to coach him and watch him grow.
So basketball, soccer. Weren't you also part of almost a dynastic type softball team? And what are some of the career highlights from said softball squad?
Oh, man. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be able to mention all of the sponsors of the Henry Anderson Park Carborough Co-Rec softball team of the time from 2005 to 2010. But there's a lot of people who'll be really happy that you brought this up on this podcast. Yeah, I think we were the Seagroves softball team. We were at one point Cozart Seagroves softball team. So Emily Cozart Boone's dad was nice enough to sponsor our softball team at one point, and then Ted and Pete Seagrove sponsored the softball team at one point. But we had a group from the athletic department when I worked here in the athletic department that played co-rec softball in Carborough at Henry Anderson Park, and you're right. It's one of the highlights of my athletic career. There's no question about it. We got wise after the first couple of years. We said, listen, we work in a Division I, like really blue blood athletic department, right? Why have we not gone and gotten the softball coaches to play on this team? And so Bev Smith and Janelle Brenneman, two former All-American softball players at the highest level, quickly became part of the team, and we got a lot better overnight.
I know you spent 1 year with him, but Coach Williams obviously achieved at a very high level and did so for a long time. As someone who was there in the locker room with him, and especially in kind of a unique year, what was it about him in your mind that made him so good and that allowed him to do what he did, not just for 1 year, but for so long?
Yeah, I mean, the word that pops into my mind is consistency, I think. Some people over the years would call it stubbornness, and I just don't agree, right? I mean, I think it's consistency. I think when you're dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds, kids in a lot of sense of the word, consistency is really, really valuable. The players knowing how you're going to react in any given moment, I don't know, I think builds a lot of trust, right? And helps them understand, what to do in any given moment, right? I mean, listen, he's just an unbelievable leader, right, of men. And he had a special way of, I think, creating connection with everybody that built trust and allowed him to then give feedback, critical feedback, allowed him to coach people into a better place, right? And, again, I'll say it, as a walk-on, you're not the focus of that every day a lot of times. I mean, you have a specific role on the team that you're trying to perform in the best possible way, but you're watching him build relationships with Raymond and Rashad and Sean and these guys who have unbelievable talent, but maybe don't know how to put it all together, right? I would say that's what his staff did so well, right? Took all of those pieces that they inherited, right? And figured out a way to get them all on the same page so that they could make the run that they did in 2005.
Did you do a senior day speech?
Oh, I think I did the first ever.
I was about to
senior day
say,
speech.
I mean, that would have been the first year that we did it with Coach Williams.
It was, yeah. And I don't know if it was strategic on his part or not, but he did not tell us we were doing that until after practice the night before. Or at least that's the way I remember
right,
it. Maybe he gave us
He had actually told you 2 months before. Whatever, it's down the road.
I blacked out. I didn't think about it for a while. Wait a minute, I'm going to have to speak in front of how many people? No, but I do remember him bringing that, and I think that's something that Coach Williams did such a great job of. I mean, he's a guy that loves the traditions of North Carolina. Obviously, it's been such a big part of his life. But even some of the traditions he developed at Kansas as he became a head coach and started shaping, a program into what he wanted it to be. And then he brought a lot of those traditions to Carolina, and some of those were probably from when he was here with Coach Smith, and then some were new.
Okay, I need you to help us settle a debate
that
we've had. Because you're a perfect person to do it. You played for both Coach Doherty and Coach Williams.
Oh, gosh.
Okay, the thing at the beginning of the game, the breakdown thing where you dive on the floor. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do.
Was that only Coach Williams, or did that happen with Coach Doherty as well?
We did not do that with Coach Doherty.
Thank you.
Boom.
Yeah, Adam and I both agree with that. But we've received multiple emails and things from people where they said, no, Carolina has done that forever. They did that under Coach Doherty. But that's not the case. That was a Coach Williams thing.
Listen, I just told you that I might misremember something. And it all sort of blends together in some ways. But no, I think I remember Coach Williams specifically implementing that as part of our pregame routine when he got here.
Look, if you agree with us, then that's absolutely the facts.
I mean, it was the reason it sunk in so well. That's the facts, yeah. That's kind of how I feel about things. Is because I don't know if you guys remember, but that year we had velour jumpsuits. Do you remember that?
I don't, but that sounds handsome.
I still have them somewhere. But we did. We had velour warm-up jumpsuits, which I looked very, very cool in. Let me tell you. And so I remember, doing the whole chop your feet, dive on the floor thing, because in the velour you would slide a little further than you were supposed to if you were just wearing some normal warm-up jacket. So it was really kind of fun.
Jonathan ends up sliding all the way to the opposing half of the court. It's like, whoops, sorry about that, guys.
Well,
exactly.
Who has velour to practice in? I mean, you don't find out until you're actually doing it. And then you're like, oh, wait.
That's right. That's sort of a theme here, right? Like all the new stuff that was implemented. I can't remember how somebody came to say, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to chop our feet, we're going to move our hips, and then we're going to dive on the floor. And okay, let's do it.
Sounds good. Yeah,
absolutely. You don't ask questions. How high?
What's the maddest you ever saw Coach Williams get in practice, whether it was at you or at someone else?
Yeah. Well, that's funny. Yeah, I should have prepared for this a little bit better. You guys should have sent a white paper over or something, some questions. No, well, the maddest at me that he ever got, I think, and I remember it. It's funny how these things imprint on you. Was during practice, the ball was going out of bounds, and I'm a walk-on. The one thing you can do is hustle, right? Like even if you can't, put up 20 in a game, you can hustle. And the ball's going out of bounds, and a lot of times I mentioned that I guarded Rashad a lot in practice, but at times I had to guard Raymond, and that got even worse because my slow feet were not staying in front of him. But in this particular instance, the ball was going out of bounds, and I was jumping in the air to try to save it, and I threw it off of Raymond. And Coach Williams did not like that in the least. And Joe Holiday pulled me aside after that practice and said, hey, I just got to explain why he didn't like that so much. And he had a situation at Kansas where I think Jacques Vaughn had broken a hand or a wrist or a finger or something. with somebody throwing the ball off of him in practice. And so he explained that to me. And in that moment, I said, I get it. Listen, if I got to take the out of bounds versus breaking Raymond's hand, yeah, I should definitely just take the ball out of bounds with me. So that's the one that I remember. Yeah.
So what did you do at Carolina after you're done playing? You said worked in the athletic department. Explain to people what you did here and then what you do now at Elon.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, it's funny. As we were walking in here, I told you guys, like, where we are sitting right now, I think is actually the exact location of my first professional desk.
Yeah. Look how much better it is now.
It is a lot nicer, I'll tell you that. But it's not better. The Carolina
Did you have rap snacks back then over there?
We did not.
I mean, come on. Did you have golden geese statues?
No.
Right there behind you?
What are golden geese statues?
Okay, Jonathan, that's such an amateur
golden
question.
Goose statues.
That's a potty, obviously, which goes to the best interview every single year here on the podcast. So, I mean, just by being on, you are in the pool for a potty. So I don't want to pressure you.
I've never been nominated for anything.
Yeah,
Thank you,
I'm not saying you're getting nominated. I'm just saying you're in the pool.
But you might want to give more thought to some of these questions about great stories you have.
Oh, yeah.
Because now that you know what's on the line, think about how life-changing that could be.
Well, you guys have contextualized it now. You've changed the paradigm for me.
Okay.
So
all right. Sorry. Okay. So this was the spot of your office. That's what you were talking about.
Oh, yeah. This was the spot of my office. So about 2 weeks before I graduated here at Carolina, one of my roommates played golf here. Matt Crenshaw looked at me and said, "Hey, what are you going to do after graduation?" And I looked at him and said, "You know what? That's probably something I should think about." And so at the time, no, I had an interest in going into work in college athletics and was able to and knew some people in the department, through my time playing on the basketball team, and one of those was Clint Gwaltney. And so I had reached out to Clint just to say, "Hey, can I do an internship in the athletic with you guys?" And as the world works sometimes, they had not taken a graduate intern from the sport management program that year. And so they had an opening. And so he said, "Yeah, come and work for the athletic ticket office at Carolina." So that was my first job. And sorry, I just got tripped up because Eric Hoots just walked into view behind the glass. So that was my first job as an intern in the athletic ticket office here. And it sounds corny, but super thankful for it. I mentioned Clint, but I got to mention Tim Sabo and Brian Bursticker and Shane Parrish. I mean, we really had an all-star cast in the athletics ticket office at Carolina at the time. And I spent the next 5 years there having a blast, learning how to work hard, but also having a lot of fun on the softball team, as well as going to Final Fours, working hard, going to bowl games, and experiencing those things from a professional perspective, learning what it takes to do that, and developing a much greater appreciation for all the people who work to make the athletic department run well for student athletes, right? So I actually I went to work at Elon University after that in athletics. I now work in our university advancement office, traveling and raising money for the school.
That's an incredible lineup in the ticket office.
Yeah, it's a big-time lineup.
I mean, that's like the Ruth Gehrig. That's the 27 Yankees of ticket office.
It's the murderer's row of all ticket offices in the nation. There's no question about it.
We've had some folks who've been in fundraising before that have joined us, and I think we've probably asked a similar question. Like, how do you do that without making it awkward? Like, because ultimately your goal is for somebody that you're hanging out with to give you a lot of money.
Yeah.
How do you try and do that without making it weird?
Well, it's funny. I mean, people, neighbors, family, whoever, they ask, like, "So what do you do?" Right? And I try to explain it to them, and then I said, "Don't worry about it." Like, because I think it's hard to understand if you're not in it, and definitely hard to believe that you actually develop like real relationships with people,
right?
That can include a conversation about impacting, in this case, Elon University in a significant way, but, just like the folks over here that are trying to raise money for, Carolina athletics. I think the people who engage in those conversations want to help the school, right? And they're just looking for some guidance on how the best way to do that, right? And so I guess it can get awkward if done the wrong way, but if you put people at the center of it, just like anything in life, and make sure that it's a symbiotic relationship, it works out great.
I don't feel like it could be. Jonathan's too cool for it. Why are you so cool? How do you stay so cool all the time? Like, I've been sitting here thinking while you're talking, I'm like, I don't like how cool this guy is. He's too cool.
Send me this link so I can show it to my kids in 10 years. And say, see, I did play at Carolina, and somebody does think I'm cool.
What if Jonathan had been like, Jones, it's funny you ask. I'm actually here to talk to you about how you can help the Phoenix rise.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we'd like to have a symbiotic relationship.
That's right.
Advance these conversations.
That's right.
The words you used were just incredible. I thought those were cool.
I didn't even know what they were, so it put me into a daze. I was like, I do want to give you a lot
guys
of
are
money.
operating-
You have a lot of vocabulary.
You guys are operating on the assumption that I'm good at what I do. Is the mistake you're making?
A lot of people say they want to work in sports.
Mm-hmm.
Many people get into sports for a couple of years and then they're like, I'm not sure I want to work in sports.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think you were able to do it successfully, and what do you think it takes to do it well?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I do think a lot of people love sports, right? And I think when you're thinking about what you want to do for the rest of your life, just like I was 2 weeks before graduation, you're like, well, I love sports. Let's do that, right? I mean, I was a film and video major here because I liked movies, right? I didn't use that major too much in my professional career, but
until now, here you are.
That's right. Look at me. I'm going to win a Golden Goose. It's going to be great. Now, I think the difference is that, some people are just fans, right? They just love sports, but they want to go to the game and watch every second of the game and dissect everything that happens, right? I'm not really that way, for better or worse. I think I liked working. Like, I liked being a part of making it happen, right? And so for me, working on the back end was actually a really good thing, because I wanted to be in service to that thing instead of being a part of it. And so I think for people that want to work in sports, I mean, I'd always tell them the same thing. I grab coffee with students at Elon or actually students from Carolina a lot of times too. John Bruner's great about bringing their graduate students over to Elon so they can see that campus and that athletic department, understand the differences in them. And a lot of times I'll grab lunch or coffee with them and I'll say, look, there's no shortage of opportunities in sports. If you're willing to work, people will take advantage of that, right? You just have to be willing to, sacrifice for a little while until you get the role that actually does pay you something, and might be in the area that you actually want to work. You might have to do some things before you get to that point. And as long as if you really love it, you'll stay in it, right? But it does get hard. I mean, the people who work in this athletic department, in the Elon athletic department, they put in long hours, and they do get paid less than some of their counterparts in other areas of the university, but they love it. And the trade-off is you work around people who are like-minded and you care about.
Hypothetically, how long would you tell Jones and I, how many years do we need to work before we get that job that pays us something?
Yeah.
Are we getting close?
Whether you guys get paid or not, you have arrived. I am sitting here looking at this podcast studio, and there is no question that you guys have arrived.
Look, just take my money, Jonathan. You don't have to smooth talk me anymore.
Well, and listen, you get summer nights in Shane's Sugar Shack as part of this gig too. I'm sure Shane hits you off with some free pizza or something like that, right?
Free pizza.
Free pizza.
I have a little bit of a discount, maybe. Okay, a couple more things before we let you go. Okay, we're at I'm sure, a very cool cocktail party, and Jonathan Miller's there. And somebody goes, oh, you played basketball at Carolina? And you're like, I did. In fact, let me tell you, boom, my best story about playing when I was with the Tar. The one that you come with at the party to make everybody laugh and think it's hilarious. What do you come out with?
Imagine that with 3 kids, you get to go to cocktail
parties.
Imagine.
Yeah. Okay. Now, let me put myself in that place. Well, first, when somebody says, and usually it's not a statement, it's more of a question. So you played basketball at Carolina? They're very surprised.
The voice goes up.
Yeah. You played basketball at Carolina? Yeah. And I say, well, played is a strong word. I sat right at the end of the bench and got a free steak dinner every night. And now, so what's the story that goes to it? Now, it typically revolves something around, they usually say, well, did you score? And I say, yeah, 10 points over 2 years. That's double figures, okay? No, but if anybody knowledgeable, we can get into this. So if anybody knowledgeable about my career on JV and varsity is around, they typically say, oh, don't you know, this is the record holder for threes made in a game in the Dean Smith Center.
Is that right?
That's 100% correct.
I don't think that's right. But I think the narrative has emerged that is true.
It's emerged because that's what I wrote.
Did you write that?
Yeah, I've
Well,
written
if
that.
you wrote it, just
Yeah.
like if you believe it, it's a fact.
Yeah.
And so that's probably my best story.
Didn't you make 9 in a game in JV?
Oh, you got it right. I think it is 9. People say 11, and I let them go when they say it.
11 sounds right.
That's right. No, really, the more impressive part of that game is that I took 22 threes in a college basketball game.
Yeah. Like almost half of them went in. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm scrambling to look here at the big book of facts to see if I can see where Jonathan ranks in all-time points at Carolina with 10. But all right. So, and I know this is kind of a cheesy way to end it, but we always like to end it with things like this. Like, now that you're older, more mature, Jonathan Miller, and you can look back at Carolina and think about it and how it's affected things. Like, how do you feel like Carolina changed you, aided you, made you who you are today?
Yeah. But that's a great question and not a hard one, right? I mean, I don't, you don't go through a day without thinking about your experience in the basketball program at Carolina. And you can tell by my answers, I had to think to come up with some of the actual basketball memories, right? But the lessons you learn from Coach Daugherty and his staff, Coach Williams and his staff, shape you, right? And in such a significant way that it's you never go throughout a day without going back to that experience and thinking about something that you went through or something that they taught you when you're in a moment of challenge or even in a moment of celebration, right? So I think I think people would probably agree with this. I think it shapes you as a person. It shaped me as a person in the most significant way of any other experience outside of my family that I've had, right? And so it may be a corny question, but there's a corny answer for you too, right? Because it's so significant that you can't almost go through any day without thinking about something that you did. I mean, the most impactful. You want to hear the most impactful moment?
Yes.
On that team, because it's a pretty good one. I tell this story too, and it's sort of corny, but it's also really funny. And so when Coach Williams got here, I think they started looking at the roster and thinking, all right, who are all these people? They're thinking, all right, who's going to start? And then they're at the bottom and they're like, well, who are these guys? We got to find out more about them, right? And to Coach Williams, to forever credit, he said, hey, stick around the team. We had to make the team again, but he said, stick around the team, work out with us, work out in the summers, come to practice, and we'll make a decision on what the final roster looks like in the fall, right? And so we really went through 2 years of trying out for the team, which I, in the end, thought was a really cool thing. But I think he gave the assignment to Joe Holiday, who I mentioned earlier, to talk to the walk-ons to figure out more about them, right? So after practice one day, Joe grabs me and we're in the locker room and he sits me down. He says, hey, I want to talk to you. He sits me down and he says, Jonathan, why are you on this team? And all the intelligence I had in the moment that I could muster, I said, I don't know. Man, it's one of my prouder moments. I said, why? And Coach said, well, you're never going to play, and your grades need to be better.
Other than that, you're a valuable member of the team.
That's right. Exactly right.
You don't look good in velour.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And so I said, okay, Coach. Well, first of all, I'll still keep working to be better at basketball, even if I'm not going to play. And I will get better grades. And he said, has anybody ever asked you that? And I said, Coach, no, nobody ever has. Nobody's taken an interest. He said, well, we are. So you need to work harder. And I said, yes, sir. And I did. And I made better grades. I never played. But I had a whole bunch of fun. And Joe, every time he sees me still, says, hey, remember that conversation we had?
By the way, the big book of facts ends at Tommy Lagarde with 1,007 points. So you're a little bit behind
1,007, so I'm just 997 off. Is that what you're telling me?
You're close, though.
997.
You're close.
Yeah. If I just could have gotten in a few more times.